Hello again, and welcome to PodcastDX, the show that brings you interviews with people just like you whose lives were forever changed by a medical diagnosis.
I'm Lita.
I'm Ron.
And I'm Jean Marie.
Together, we're the hosts of PodcastDX. And on today's episode, we're talking about vaccine safety, a topic that has saved millions of lives and continues to protect communities around the globe.
Vaccines have been around longer than most people even realize. The very first vaccine was developed in 1796 by Edward Jenner. He discovered that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox didn't get smallpox, and that breakthrough led to the smallpox vaccine. That was the world's first vaccine, actually.
Yep. And it took time, but that one discovery eventually led to the eradication of smallpox. In fact, smallpox became the first and so far the only human disease to be eradicated completely by vaccination. The last naturally occurring case was in 1977, and the World Health Organization declared smallpox eradicated in 1980.
That's huge. I mean, smallpox used to kill millions of people every year, and now it's basically, it's not gone, but it's kind of gone. Well, yeah.
It's gone.
Because of vaccines.
All right, so let's, this is great news, but let's talk about how vaccines actually work. Essentially, what they do is they teach your immune system to recognize and fight specific germs, like viruses or bacteria, but before you're exposed to the real thing.
They do this using inactivated or weakened parts of the germ or a piece of the genetic material. So when people say you don't know what's in the vaccine, you're right. You and I don't know what's in the vaccine, but the scientists do.
Right.
They create the vaccine.
Right. And the vaccines are checked for safety and efficacy.
Yeah, that was all I was going to say.
And constantly are being improved.
That's all I was going to say.
Right.
Your body learns to fight it off without getting sick, and it remembers how to do it again in the future.
Right. It's like learning a foreign language before you go on vacation.
Like Australia.
Once again, Mom, they speak Australian English.
Okay.
So
so kind of like a fire drill for your immune system. You practice now so that you're prepared for the real thing.
Right. But here's the part that really blows people's minds.
Okay,
according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, vaccines prevent 4 to 5 million deaths every year. That's from diseases like diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, influenza, and the measles.
And we just talked about pertussis or whooping cough, so we know that works. The CDC reports that in the U.S. alone, childhood vaccines given in the last 25 years will prevent over 300 million illnesses, 855,000 deaths, and $1.65 trillion in healthcare costs. That's trillion with a T.
and you know what? I thought about that a lot when the COVID epidemic was like at its height, and people were hesitant and saying they don't want to get the COVID vaccine and they don't care if they get COVID. But they weren't thinking about like the cost in terms of not only exposing others around them, but also the cost to healthcare and the fact that they're putting all those healthcare workers at risk as well. So it's not just you, the individual; it affects everyone.
Everybody in the pipeline.
Yep. And think about diseases we don't worry about anymore. Polio, for example, which paralyzed over 15,000 people a year in the U.S. before the vaccine. Now it's eradicated here in the U.S.
Let me just add real quick as a side note, where I work, I do all the tours and everything, trying to bring students in.
Right.
Right now, our disabilities that we serve are mainly like cerebral palsy, spina bifida, and muscular dystrophy.
Right.
When I give a history of our program, when we started, our students had post-polio.
Had what?
Post-polio.
Oh, okay.
So, they were post-polio.
Right.
So,
when was that? How many years ago?
well, our program started in the 1940s.
Okay.
So, probably until like the 1970s, 1980s, that's when we started getting more and more students with cerebral palsy.
Okay.
But before then, it was more people that had
Polio as a child.
And now you don't see very many adults, although there still are some, you don't see very many adults with polio. And right now, you don't see children with polio because of the vaccines.
Right, right. Well, let's get into the part that sometimes makes people nervous. Safety vaccines, like any medical product, are tested thoroughly. Before they're approved, they go through multiple phases of clinical trials involving tens of thousands of volunteers.
And after their approval, they're constantly monitored for side effects through systems like VAERS, VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. That's run by the CDC and the FDA.
And those rare reactions that you sometimes hear about, they're usually mild, like a sore arm or a low fever. Serious side effects are extremely rare. We're talking less than 1 in a million doses for most vaccines.
And you can actually look up the adverse
Yes,
effects.
you can look that up.
Because
Right.
a lot of times somebody will say, oh, my cousin's sister's brother's nephew's best
door
friend,
neighbor.
right,
Yeah.
best friend of the next door neighbor died from it. Well, go and look it up because they actually, that information is available and you can confirm that claim or you can defute that claim rather quickly. And if you personally have experienced a side effect, you can let your healthcare provider know, or you can, report it directly.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, right now there just seems to be a lot of misinformation out there, and people tend to believe it, and then, it escalates. So,
Right. Well, when I hear something, I want to know what was the source.
Right.
I want to go to that source and confirm that information. And if it's a study, I want to see that it's a reproducible study, and that it's been peer reviewed as well.
Right. And we also have to weigh the risk of vaccine against the risk of the disease. For example, measles can cause pneumonia, brain swelling, or death. The measles vaccine, it's been around since the 1960s and is 97% effective with 2 doses.
Right. Right. I tell you, one myth that we still hear today that absolutely drives me crazy is that vaccines cause autism. And unfortunately, that claim was based on a discredited and retracted study from 1998. And since then, dozens of large, reputable studies have shown no link whatsoever between vaccines and autism. But what happens is, unfortunately, you get some people out there that make that claim and they put it out on social media, and there's others that want to believe it because they see it in print.
Right. And I think also people want to assign blame to something else.
Absolutely.
And there isn't always a reason or a cause that we can pinpoint.
Right.
And you also want to do everything you can to protect your child.
Right.
Right. And vaccination is certainly one of the best ways you can protect your child.
So, okay, let's talk about what's going on in mainly in Texas right now with the measles outbreak.
Right.
And that could easily have been squashed with vaccinations.
Right.
There were 6 cases in Indiana last week.
Right.
Absolutely. And again, it's misinformation and people
And-
tending to believe it. Now, there are some
And preventable
cases,
deaths.
Yes.
Those
Absolutely.
were all preventable deaths.
Yes.
Now, there are some cases because of religious reasons, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Health conditions, and some people that their immune system does not react
Exactly.
to vaccinations.
But that is few and far between.
Right.
And that's
versus,
a case by case.
Right. And that's why everyone else needs to get vaccinated to protect those people.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it's a myth that just won't go away. And actually, I believe the first research study was done by a child. And no offense to children because they're, the future, and there are many brilliant children out there, but unfortunately,
You don't take a science project from mid-school and call it
call
gospel.
it, right. It's important to base your decisions on evidence, reproducible, peer-reviewed, scientific evidence, and not what you see on a social media
Yep.
post.
And just to be clear, vaccines do not overload the immune system. Kids are exposed to more germs in one afternoon at a daycare than from all of their childhood vaccines combined.
So, talking about vaccines, we cannot talk about vaccine safety without mentioning COVID-19 vaccines. Although they were developed faster than usual, they still met all the safety and efficacy standards.
Yes, the speed came from decades of prior research on mRNA technology and massive global collaboration. They were also rolled out in stages, starting with the most vulnerable.
And according to the CDC, COVID vaccines have saved hundreds of thousands of lives in the U.S. alone. Hospitalizations and deaths dropped dramatically once vaccines became widely available.
It's good information, absolutely. Right now, let's touch on something else called community immunity, or a lot of people have heard the term herd immunity. When a large portion of the population is immune, it protects those who cannot get vaccinated, like newborns or people with certain medical conditions.
Right, like Gene was saying, it's got everybody in the pipeline has to have some part of it. Well, vaccines don't just protect you, they protect your family, your neighbors, and your community.
Right, it's a ripple effect. And in public health, that ripple can save millions of lives.
So what can you do? Well, first, check your vaccine records. Are you up to date with your flu shot? How about tetanus? COVID boosters? And shingles if you're over 50. And I got my.
Yep.
And HPV if you are under the age of 27.
And if you're a parent, talk to your pediatrician. The recommended vaccine schedule is based on when kids are most at risk for those diseases. It's not just random.
And it's based on where you reside. And for travelers, if you're going abroad, some
Like to Australia?
Yes, mother, to Australia,
What
where
about
they
Michigan?
still speak English. Some countries require or recommend specific vaccinations, for example, yellow fever or hepatitis A, because those are endemic in that area. So don't wait until the last minute. Make sure you check to see what vaccinations you might need before you travel abroad.
Good idea. Vaccines are one of the greatest achievements in the history of medicine. They have wiped out diseases, protected our kids, saved billions in healthcare
I
costs.
thought it was trillions.
It might have been trillions.
Okay.
With a T.
Okay.
And most importantly, saved lives.
So, folks, stay informed. Talk with your doctor
Not your social media expert.
Or
and make
influencer.
decisions based on facts and not, I repeat, not fear.
And remember, when you get vaccinated, you're not just protecting yourself, you are protecting your entire community.
Well, thank you for joining the show today. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regime. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of PodcastDX.
Stay healthy and stay informed.
Till next week.